your soul is mine. Yeah, that saying feels a lot different after watching this flick. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below anytime we have something. You'll be the first to know. It's here, Mortal Kombat! Unfortunately, that entire energy level that I just gave is pretty much this, the most that this entire film has. I have to come at this from a standpoint of what the original Mortal Kombat film and the game series to me means. I play Mortal Kombat. When it first comes out, I love them. They're great. And then I get tired of them pretty quickly. That's just the case with fighting games overall. I feel like there's not a real level of challenge or story that keeps me engaged for much longer than after the shelf life of things. So, but I did very much enjoy that first Mortal Kombat. I actually remember being in Chicago. It was around my birthday one summer, and the just energy that was in that theater when that came out. You just get that techno bass pumping, and you get the soundtrack going, and the campiness, but cheesiness. But it there was a level of family fun to it. Didn't quite fit in with the series because the series is much more R rated, but that movie it did what it was supposed to do. But there was an energy level to it. This movie, unfortunately, has the added trouble of not seeing it in the theater. Even if you do or are lucky enough to go watch this in the theater, you're not watching it in a full theater, so it does not have the community experience that I think a film like this may or may not need. The other thing that happens, unfortunately, is that essentially for a lot of it, you're doing a one-to-one from that film, or even some of the animated stuff, which I think is overall just done a lot better. Scorpion's Revenge is an infinitely better film than anything that we get here. Which might do a disservice to this movie as well, because that's in recent history and it just handles the story of this significantly better. But I think when you're doing a lot of familiar steps from the 95 film to this film and you have not made a grasp or drastic improvement, it leads a little bit to why are we doing this, other than to fulfill a couple of die-hard Mortal Kombat fans. I am not one of them, so I'm looking at this more as a film goer. I don't hate the games, but they're not my strong suit. So watching this just as a film, it's kind of like the movie starts off strong. I think the opening sequence with Sub-Zero and Scorpion plays well and it's emotional. But then you get about an hour of just terrible pacing and some very cheesy acting that doesn't really lead to much. And so you're watching these actors and actresses go through these characters, and you're as a fan are supposed to just be like, hey, there's so and so, there's so and so, there's so and so, and there's some of that. There's Sonya, there's Kano, there's Liu Kang, there's Kano who Kano was badass in this. You get those, and you're kind of just like, oh, those are cool, but you don't really. There's no real story to it. It's kind of like people go scoring through the paces, and you're like, at some point, either someone needs to start fighting, or you need to trick me and put that score back on screen or back in here so I can kind of get amped again. And neither of those really happen till the tail end. You never really get the score, and it's full bombastic. You get chords of it. You get like, oh, they're about to start it, or they're about to do it, and it never happens. I don't know why that choice is made, but either play it or don't. Don't tease me. The fighting sequences in this are pretty solid. This feels like a martial arts film, much more detailed fighting and choreography than the original. There are some odd choices to cut action sequences at weird spots, so sometimes it feels a little disjointed. I wish, if you're going to show me this and you're going to do so much hand-to-hand combat, I really wish you would pull back and sort of do it like either don't do the boring shaky cam stuff, but if you can do John Wick and give us more of a wide where these actors are doing more of this, or we can see them doing more of it, that's great. When you cut and piece and put everything together, it feels a little cheaper, and it's kind of like this. You lose the realism when you know, like, okay, I'm now watching this get cut, and kind of watching a poorly done action sequence, which I think in a better hand, this could have been a little bit better stylized and a little bit better detailed. I do like the Sub-Zero Scorpion fight that occurs at the end. However, I think, unfortunately, the trailer gave away a lot of the good parts of that. And so, whatever I was going to be excited about by watching, I was ruined from the trailers, which that shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't show your whole load and a lot of your good load in your trailer, which I think this movie did in spades, because all the good spots are in the trailer, and then when we get to the movie, there's about an hour and 40 or hour and 20 of like filler that you kind of just like, oh, I'm just kind of going through the paces. Anything leading from after the opening sequence to the first real fight sequence that they have with Shang is utterly forgettable and extremely hard to watch. When the fights do start happening, it's fun. You're kind of like smiling. Oh, you're seeing this person do their finisher. You're seeing this person do their finisher. You're getting flawless blood. It's a weird thing, and it's just sort of just the case with the game too. Sometimes you're like, oh yeah, now it's just blood for the sake of being for blood, and you're kind of like, well, that's what Mortal Kombat is, and you're either in and you're out. So that doesn't really deter me. The two biggest issues that I have once you get past the fighting and some of the bad story development and some cheesy acting, the two biggest issues I have is Cole. I don't know why this character was used as your lead into this film. The character doesn't exist in Mortal Kombat lore. You're making a story beat or a story thread to occur for him, which is fine, but you could literally piecemeal that to any other character and at least keep the characterizations or characters that we know into Mortal Kombat there. Cole is a very vanilla character, and it seems like he's more just in the way as opposed to having someone that we actually do know in his place. It's not that fascinating to look at as far as like, oh, you have Melina looking all creepy and weird and Cabal or Shang, like there's no super aesthetic to him, so there's no reason to have him there. He's not talented enough of a fighter. And I'll not discuss his acting ability. So it's kind of just like, well, why is he the person that we're using to go through with this film when you could have spent more time on some characters that we do know that would have probably been fleshed out or just an easier way to enter into this world. But one of my biggest pet peeves for films lately, just in general, is that you have not created a story for this film in itself. You have built this film solely for the purpose that you can make other films in the future. There is no beginning, middle, and end of this. Is just the beginning, middle, and then we're like, cool, I'll see you next time. And that's very presumptuous for an audience, because this movie's not good enough for you to pat yourself on the back and be like, I will see you in 3 films when we actually get to the tournament. Because, spoiler, for a movie that's called Mortal Kombat that's about a tournament, there is no tournament here. This is the pre-tournament where Shang Tsung is ambushing folks before they get to the tournament, and then the movie ends. And you're like, well, hold on. The whole reason I'm here is to see it turn. What is this? And it's sort of a bizarre way to start a franchise or a series if you don't even have anything that, outside of the characters just popping up and doing their fatalities, there's nothing that really feels like the essence of Mortal Kombat. I feel like the 95 film, as cheesy as that was, too, did a better job of like, at least we're going to put people together like we do in the fighting game, do a tournament, and then move on and move on. You don't get that here, and that's sort of sad. And then you get a Taylor button on at the end that sort of leads us to believing that we're going to get a Johnny Cage appearance in the future, which leads me to question, why the fuck didn't we just put Johnny Cage in this one instead of Cole? It would have been a better entry point, and I feel like they basically are doing the exact same thing. Outside of not wanting to be an almost exact 1-to-1 to the original, the 95 Mortal Kombat, I don't know why you do that. Again, like the original film, Raiden is still sort of a protector of them, so he doesn't really fight. He doesn't do the Christopher Lambert. I don't think so. That's so classic, but also so cheesy. But it feels like he's trying to. There's a definite level of this Raiden trying to almost replicate what that raid did, and I don't know why, because I feel like everyone didn't really like that, and but we're doing it again, and we got a Goro that I feel looks worse than the '95 Goro. The CGI just doesn't look good on him, and there's a lot of things that when everything is side by side with that original one, you're like, yes, this one at least gets the violence and the blood and we get some fatalities, but I think overall that first one, and not talking about Annihilation because that's just a bad movie, but I think that first one just does a better job as an entire film without the violence, whereas this one adds the violence and it's just a poor made overall property. I'll never watch this again. So I might scale up once is enough, play it against them, or give me a time zone so I never have to think about this again. Um, it's on the cusp. It's between once is enough and give me a time stone. I think there's some things that are fun enough where I'm like, oh, that was fun. So it's not a complete erasure, but it's definitely once it's enough. I will never revisit this flick again. Even if they come out with another one, I'm like, cool. I'll just start with this one and won't go back to revisiting and kind of watch along. This is definitely one of those movies. A lot like I think Man of Steel probably had one of the better trailers ever. This is one of those movies that the trailer was significantly better than the movie, and unfortunately, the trailer gave away a lot of things that would have been better to see inside the film without sort of being spoiled and knowing, oh, this is where this comes. He's going to do this and this and this. I will give this. I will shoot a little bit of bail for this film. I think in an audience with a community, sort of like some horror movies and some comedies, I think this movie could be elevated slightly if it was with an audience and you sort of have the community feel and you're laughing and getting excited about some of the same things. But I feel like just watching this at home, I feel like there's about an hour of this film that the audience is just going to be out, just checked out, because there's nothing really happening in the film and nobody is charismatic, entertaining, or talented enough to sort of keep the investment going. If you guys see Mortal Kombat the new one, what did you guys think? Go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcast. We are there. We are currently doing, and our last one's coming, we're currently doing Buddies for Life, a look at retrospective buddy films through the eyes of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You can find that wherever podcasts. We also have a sister podcast, so if you can't do that anymore, where we talk about classic films like American Beauty or West Side Story and look at those films through the eyes of 2021 and see if some of the things that they got away with back then they can still do today. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.